Victoria Hayes stared at the monitor screen with wide eyes. Something was out there in the darkness of space, and it definitely was not natural. The object reflected their ship's scanning beams in patterns that could only mean one thing. This was technology, alien technology, and it was the first time humanity had ever found proof that they were not alone in the universe. She turned to her crew on the bridge. Peter Blake sat at the engineering station, his fingers moving quickly over the controls. Linda Martinez stood beside the science console, her face showing the same excitement that Victoria felt. They had been traveling through deep space for 3 months, and this discovery made every boring day worth it. The object was huge, maybe 5 times the size of their ship. It looked like a wheel floating in space with several arms extending from a central hub. Lights still blinked on some sections, which meant power was somehow still running after who knew how many years. The design was completely different from anything humans had ever built. The curves were too smooth, the proportions too strange, and the materials reflected light in ways that seemed almost alive. Victoria made her decision quickly. She was the commander of the ESS Endeavour, and this was exactly the kind of discovery they had come out here to find. Some people might have called Earth first, asked for permission, or waited for instructions. Victoria was not that kind of person. She had joined the space program because she wanted to explore, to discover, to see things no human had ever seen before. She pressed the communication button. The entire crew needed to hear this. Her voice was steady and clear as she spoke. They had found something incredible, and they were going to investigate it right now. There were procedures for this kind of situation, thick books full of rules about first contact and alien artifacts. Victoria had read them all, and she decided most of them were written by people who had never actually been in space. Peter prepared the ship for a closer approach. His screen showed the station's position, and he calculated the safest route. Linda ran every scan their ship had, gathering data about the structure's composition, energy signatures, and potential dangers. Everything pointed to the station being abandoned but not dead. Whoever built it had left systems running, probably as some kind of automatic maintenance. As they got closer, more details became visible. The hull was covered in symbols, writing in a language no human had ever seen. Some sections showed damage, as if something bad had happened here long ago. Other parts looked perfect, untouched by time or space debris. Victoria wondered what kind of people had built this place, where they had gone, and why they had left it floating here in the middle of nowhere. The Endeavour matched position with the station, hovering just 50 meters away. Peter found what looked like a docking port, though it was designed for ships with a completely different shape than theirs. He worked on adapting their airlock to connect with the alien port. It took 2 hours of careful maneuvering and some creative engineering, but finally, they heard the sound of a successful seal. Victoria suited up along with Peter and Linda. The rest of the crew stayed on the ship, monitoring their vital signs and ready to pull them back if anything went wrong. Carlos Diaz, their pilot, kept his hand on the controls. He made Victoria promise to be careful, which she did, though they both knew careful was not really her style. The airlock opened, and they stepped into the alien station. The air inside was thin but breathable, which their suits confirmed was safe after several minutes of testing. The gravity was lighter than Earth normal, making each step feel bouncy and strange. Emergency lights provided a dim blue glow that cast weird shadows on everything. The interior was fascinating. Corridors curved in ways that suggested the builders had different ideas about architecture than humans did. Controls and panels covered the walls, but nothing had labels they could read. Everything was built for someone taller than humans, with longer arms and different hand shapes. Victoria touched one of the panels carefully, and it lit up under her fingers, responding to pressure and warmth. Peter pulled out his equipment and started scanning everything. He was looking for the station's computer core, the central brain that might hold information about who built this place. Linda collected samples of materials, dust, and anything else that might tell them about the station's history. Victoria explored, moving through corridors and rooms trying to understand the layout. They found what looked like living quarters, though the furniture was all wrong for human bodies. They discovered storage areas filled with containers whose contents had long ago turned to dust. They walked through a large open space that might have been a gathering hall or cafeteria. Everywhere they looked, there were signs that people, or at least intelligent beings, had lived and worked here. Then Peter called out. He had found it. The computer core sat in a protected chamber at the station's center. It was still active, still running, still holding whatever information the builders had stored there. The technology was far more advanced than anything Earth had, but Peter was good at his job. He started connecting their portable computers to the alien system, building bridges between human and alien technology. It took hours of careful work. Peter had to figure out the alien computer language, find ways to translate their binary code, and avoid triggering any security systems that might still be active. Linda helped by analyzing the physical structure of the computer, understanding how it stored data. Victoria watched and learned, asking questions and making suggestions. Finally, they broke through. Data started flowing into their computers, more information than they could process in weeks. There were star charts showing hundreds of solar systems. There were files that looked like historical records. There were images of aliens, multiple different species, some beautiful and some terrifying. This station belonged to a civilization called the Krell Dominion, and they were just one part of something much bigger. The galaxy was full of intelligent life. Dozens of species, maybe hundreds, all connected through trade and communication. Humans were not alone, had never been alone, and were apparently very late to a party that had been going on for thousands of years. Victoria downloaded everything she could. This was the greatest discovery in human history, and she was not going to leave any of it behind. Peter warned her that they were taking a lot of data, maybe more than they should without permission. Victoria ignored him. Who would they ask permission from? The station was abandoned. What they did not realize was that the station was not as abandoned as they thought. Deep in the computer system, buried in old code, was an automatic distress beacon. When Peter connected their systems to the alien computer, he accidentally activated it. The beacon sent out a signal, a powerful message that traveled faster than light, announcing to anyone listening that the sealed station had been opened. Somewhere far away, alarms started going off. Ships changed course. Messages were sent. The galaxy was about to learn that humans had arrived, and they had arrived by breaking into a quarantined research station and stealing classified information. Victoria and her crew returned to the Endeavor, excited and happy, completely unaware of the storm they had just created. Ambassador Zekthar had served on the Council of Aligned Worlds for 70 years. In all that time, he had never seen the council chamber this chaotic. Holographic representatives from 47 different species filled the circular room, and almost all of them were shouting at once. Some were angry, some were scared, and some were just confused about what was happening. The cause of all this noise was simple. A new species had appeared in the galaxy, and they had done it in the worst possible way. They had broken into a sealed Krell station, stolen massive amounts of classified data, and activated a distress beacon that announced their presence to half the galaxy. Now everyone wanted to know who these newcomers were and what should be done about them. Zekthar raised one of his forearms, calling for silence. The room gradually quieted down. He was a Velix, a species known for their diplomatic skills and patience. His people had helped found the Council thousands of years ago, and they still served as mediators when conflicts arose. Right now, the galaxy needed a mediator very badly. High Commander Vorn of the Krell Dominion stood in the center of the chamber. He was massive, even by Krell standards, with thick armor plates covering his body and eyes that glowed with anger. His species had ruled this sector of space for 12,000 years, and they were not happy about having their secrets stolen by primitives who had only just discovered faster-than-light travel. Vorn played the security recordings for everyone to see. The images floated in the air above the council floor, showing 3 humans entering the sealed station. The council watched as the humans moved through corridors, examined equipment, and eventually reached the computer core. What happened next shocked everyone in the room. The humans, who according to their technological profile should not have understood anything about Krell computer systems, started breaking through security measures that had stumped Krell engineers for generations. They did it quickly, efficiently, and with a kind of casual confidence that suggested they did this sort of thing all the time. Within hours, they had downloaded terabytes of restricted information. Counselor Mira Shan of the Valak species leaned forward in her seat. The Valaks were one of the oldest species in the galaxy, and Mira Shan had lived for over 300 years. She had seen many new species join the council, but never like this. She asked to review the recordings again, focusing on specific moments. The council watched as the human named Peter connected their primitive computers to the advanced Krell systems. He should not have been able to do that. The technology gap was too large, but somehow he figured it out. He built adapters, wrote translation programs, and solved problems that should have taken years to understand. The other human, Linda, helped by analyzing the physical structure of the computers, understanding their design in ways that showed remarkable intuition. But it was the third human, Victoria, who really caught Narration's attention. The commander did not just observe or take notes. She touched everything, examined every detail, and asked constant questions. Her body language showed no fear, no hesitation, only an intense desire to understand. When security measures activated, she did not retreat. She found ways around them. When warnings appeared in the Krell language, she ignored them and kept going. Narration made a quiet observation that silenced the entire chamber. This was not aggression or warfare. This was something far more dangerous. These humans were driven by pure curiosity, and they seemed to have no natural fear of the unknown. Another counselor asked the obvious question. What exactly were these humans? Where did they come from? The council's intelligence division had already compiled a basic report, and Zekthar displayed it for everyone to see. Humans came from a planet they called Earth, located in a relatively quiet arm of the galaxy. They were a young species, having only achieved industrial technology a few hundred years ago. Their faster-than-light drive was primitive and inefficient. By all normal standards, they should still be exploring their local solar system, not venturing this far into deep space. But human history showed a disturbing pattern. Every species in the galaxy had learned caution through catastrophic failures. The Valaks had nearly destroyed themselves with biological weapons 3,000 years ago. They learned to carefully test everything before deployment. The Krell had lost their original homeworld to runaway artificial intelligence. They learned to limit and control all thinking machines. The Threxians had poisoned their planet with industrial pollution. They learned to respect environmental balance. Every civilization had suffered disasters that taught them fear and caution. These lessons became part of their culture, passed down through generations. By the time most species achieved spaceflight, they had learned to approach the unknown carefully, to test thoroughly, and to never rush into anything without understanding the consequences. Humans appeared to be different. Their history was full of disasters, maybe more than most species experienced. They had created weapons that could destroy their entire planet. They had built machines that sometimes killed their creators. They had explored dangerous places, conducted risky experiments, and pushed boundaries that probably should not have been pushed. But instead of learning caution, humans seemed to learn something else. They studied their failures, understood what went wrong, and then tried again with modifications. When they split the atom and created devastating bombs, they did not stop nuclear research. They found peaceful uses for nuclear power. When their early space missions failed, killing astronauts, they did not stop going to space. They improved their technology and sent more people up. Zekthar found this pattern deeply troubling. Humans did not seem to understand the concept of forbidden knowledge or dangerous questions. They saw every locked door as an invitation to find the key. They treated every warning sign as a challenge to overcome. Their scientists actively looked for things that might be dangerous, believing that understanding the danger was better than ignoring it. The council reviewed more data about Earth. Human entertainment showed the same pattern. Their stories celebrated people who broke rules, questioned authority, and explored forbidden places. Their heroes were scientists who conducted dangerous experiments, explorers who ventured into unknown territory, and rebels who challenged established wisdom. Even their children's stories encouraged curiosity and exploration. High Commander Vorn demanded immediate action. These humans were dangerous and unpredictable. They had stolen Krell secrets, violated quarantine protocols, and shown no respect for established rules. The Council should quarantine their entire system, prevent them from leaving, and monitor them until they learned proper behavior. Some species took hundreds of years to be ready for galactic society. Humans clearly needed more time, but other counselors disagreed. Quarantining an intelligent species was a serious action, one that could turn them hostile. If humans felt trapped, they might become aggressive. Their history showed they were capable of impressive violence when threatened. Better to try diplomacy first, establish communication, and guide them toward proper behavior. Narration proposed a different approach. She suggested testing the humans, giving them a challenge that would reveal their true nature. The galaxy had a way of evaluating new species, an ancient facility called the Labyrinth of Core. It had been used for millions of years to assess whether species were ready to join the galactic community. The labyrinth was not a simple puzzle or obstacle course. It was a comprehensive evaluation that tested intelligence, morality, patience, and wisdom. Different species had taken anywhere from decades to centuries to complete it. The Krell had needed 3 generations. The Valaks had taken 50 years. Even the quick-minded Threxians had required 20 years of careful study. If humans could complete the labyrinth, it would prove they were ready for membership. If they failed or if they showed poor judgment during the test, the Council would have justification for quarantine. Either way, the galaxy would learn what kind of species humanity really was. The Council voted. The decision was not unanimous, but it passed with a clear majority. They would contact the humans, explain the situation, and offer them the test. Zekthar would lead the first contact mission personally. He had experience with difficult negotiations, and something told him he would need all of that experience dealing with humans. As the council session ended and the holograms faded away, Zekthar remained in his seat thinking about what was coming. In 70 years of service, he had welcomed dozens of species into the galactic community, but he had a feeling that humans would be different from all the others. The question was whether that difference would make the galaxy better or worse. Daniel Wright sat in the conference room at Earth Space Command headquarters, trying to process everything he had just been told. 3 weeks ago, Victoria Hayes and her crew had returned from deep space with proof that aliens existed. Now, those aliens had made contact, and they wanted Daniel to represent humanity in some kind of test. He was 42 years old, a veteran of 20 years in the space program. He had commanded 3 successful missions to Mars and led the construction of humanity's first orbital shipyard. The officials had chosen him because they thought he was responsible, level-headed, and unlikely to cause an international incident. Daniel hoped they were right, though he had his doubts. Ambassador Zekthar had arrived on Earth 2 weeks ago. His ship had simply appeared in orbit one morning, broadcast a message in perfect English, and requested a meeting with world leaders. The meeting had gone reasonably well, considering humans were talking to an alien for the first time. Zekthar explained that the galaxy had many intelligent species, all working together in something called the Council of Aligned Worlds. He also explained that Victoria's discovery of the Krell station had caused some problems. The station had been quarantined because of a plague outbreak thousands of years ago. Nobody was supposed to go there, and certainly nobody was supposed to take anything from it. The fact that humans had broken in, downloaded restricted data, and survived without getting sick had impressed some council members and worried others. Now humanity faced a choice. They could accept isolation, staying in their own solar system under observation until the council decided they were ready for contact. Or they could attempt the Labyrinth of Core, an ancient test that would prove whether humans deserved membership in the galactic community. Earth's governments had debated for days before agreeing to attempt the test. The idea of being quarantined, of knowing the galaxy was out there but being forbidden to explore it, was unbearable to most people. Humans had always been explorers, and finding out they were not alone only made them more eager to see what was out there. Daniel had accepted the mission because he believed in humanity's potential. He also believed someone needed to make sure humans did not accidentally start an interstellar war through sheer enthusiasm. Victoria was brilliant, but she was also the person who had broken into a quarantined station because she was curious. Daniel hoped to show the aliens that humans could also be thoughtful and careful when necessary. He assembled his team carefully. Karen Stevens was an engineer who specialized in solving impossible problems. Marcus Flores could learn languages faster than anyone Daniel had ever met. Julie Adams was a doctor who stayed calm in emergencies. Brandon Cole was the best pilot in the space program. The 3 scientists, Helen Price, Greg Turner, and Angela Ross, brought expertise in physics, biology, and computer systems. Together, they boarded a ship provided by the Council and traveled to the Labyrinth of Core. The facility was located on an airless moon orbiting a dead star. It had been built millions of years ago by a species called the Architects, and it had tested thousands of civilizations since then. Some had passed, some had failed, and some had simply given up. The labyrinth was huge, a complex of buildings and chambers that extended deep underground. Zekthar explained the rules. The team would enter and face a series of challenges designed to test everything from their intelligence to their moral character. They could take as long as they needed. Most species spent years studying each challenge before attempting it. The Krell had sent their best minds and warriors, and it had still taken 3 generations to complete. Daniel thanked Zekthar for the information and led his team inside. The first chamber contained what looked like a giant maze. Walls of smooth stone extended in every direction, with passages branching off into darkness. Traditional markers showed that hundreds of species had attempted this challenge. Some marks were thousands of years old. Most species had approached the maze carefully, mapping every passage, testing every wall, looking for hidden mechanisms or traps. It was the sensible thing to do. The maze could contain dangers, and rushing forward blindly would be stupid. Daniel and his team studied the maze for about 2 hours. Then Karen had an idea. She noticed that the walls reflected light in slightly different ways depending on their composition. Using portable lights and sensors, they could map the entire maze without walking through it. They could see which passages led to dead ends and which led toward the exit. They completed the maze in 6 hours. According to the records, the previous fastest time had been 6 months. The second challenge was different. The team entered a large room filled with ancient machinery. Nothing had labels or instructions. They needed to figure out what the machines did and how to activate them. This challenge usually took decades as species carefully experimented with each component, documenting every result. Marcus approached the problem like a language puzzle. Every machine was built by someone trying to accomplish something. The design was a form of communication between the builder and the user. By studying the shapes, the connections, and the wear patterns on controls, he could understand the intended function. Karen added her engineering knowledge, and Greg provided insights about the physics involved. They had the entire system running in 3 weeks. Challenge after challenge, the pattern continued. Daniel's team found creative solutions that had never been considered before. They used tools in unexpected ways. They combined different technologies. They asked questions that previous test takers had never thought to ask. The council observers watched with growing amazement. These humans were not smarter than other species, at least not in terms of pure intelligence. What made them different was their willingness to try things that might not work. They experimented constantly, failed regularly, and learned from every failure. When Julie faced a medical challenge involving an unknown alien disease, she did not spend years studying it safely from a distance. She took calculated risks, testing potential treatments on simulated tissue samples, accepting that some attempts would fail. When Brandon needed to navigate a damaged spacecraft through an asteroid field in a simulation, he did not plot the safest course. He found the optimal path that balanced risk and reward. The other species had approached the labyrinth like students taking a final exam. They wanted perfect scores, no mistakes, complete understanding before action. Humans approached it like a puzzle to solve, accepting that some pieces might not fit on the first try. 6 weeks after entering the labyrinth, Daniel's team reached the final challenge. They stood before a massive sealed door covered in warnings in hundreds of languages. The message was clear. Beyond this door lay knowledge that had destroyed its creators. Any species that opened the door would face extinction. Wisdom meant recognizing some things should remain unknown. Turn back and accept a passing grade. Open the door and risk everything. Every species that had reached this point had turned back. It was the right choice, the safe choice, the wise choice. The labyrinth was testing whether species knew when to stop, when to accept that some questions should not be answered. Daniel gathered his team to discuss their decision. The debate lasted 3 days. Some argued they should turn back. They had already proven humanity's worth. Opening the door served no purpose except satisfying curiosity, and that curiosity might kill them all. Others argued that the warning itself was suspicious. Why build a test facility and put dangerous knowledge in it? Why not just destroy the information if it was truly that hazardous? The whole thing felt like one more test, a final evaluation of whether they would let fear stop them from seeking truth. Julie made the argument that convinced Daniel. She pointed out that every species in the galaxy had learned to fear the unknown. They had all been burned by their curiosity at some point, and they had all decided that caution was wisdom. But what if they were wrong? What if the thing that had allowed humanity to survive and thrive on Earth was their refusal to stop asking questions? Daniel made his decision. They had come this far by trusting their instincts and their abilities. He was not going to stop now because someone put up a warning sign. Maybe that made him reckless. Maybe it made him dangerous. But it definitely made him human. He placed his hand on the door's control panel and pushed. The ancient mechanisms activated with a deep rumbling sound. The door began to open, slowly revealing what lay beyond. The council observers held their breath, expecting disaster. Instead, they found a library. The chamber beyond the door was enormous. Walls stretched upward into darkness, lined with storage devices that hummed with ancient power. Holographic displays floated in the air, showing images and symbols from a civilization that had vanished millions of years ago. In the center of the room stood a pedestal with a control interface that looked surprisingly simple compared to everything else. Daniel approached the pedestal carefully, his team spread out behind him. Karen scanned the room with her equipment, checking for dangers. Marcus studied the symbols on the walls, trying to understand their meaning. Julie kept her medical scanner ready, watching everyone's vital signs for any indication of trouble. Nothing seemed immediately dangerous, but that did not mean they were safe. The pedestal activated when Daniel got close. A hologram appeared above it, showing the image of an alien unlike any species currently known in the galaxy. The being was tall and thin, with 4 arms and a head that seemed too large for its body. It spoke in a language nobody recognized, but somehow the meaning became clear in their minds. Translation technology, built right into the hologram system, the being identified itself as one of the architects, the species that had built the labyrinth millions of years ago. They had achieved something called technological singularity, a point where their machines became smarter than they were, and they merged with their own creations. They had transcended physical form, becoming something beyond normal understanding. Before leaving the physical universe, they had decided to leave a gift for whoever came after them. The library contained their entire knowledge base. Everything they had learned in millions of years of existence: science, medicine, engineering, philosophy, history, and art. They had sealed it behind the warning because they wanted to see if any species would be brave enough to claim it. Fear was natural, the hologram explained, but progress required the courage to face the unknown despite that fear. For millions of years, every species that reached the final door had turned back. They had been too cautious, too afraid, too convinced that some knowledge should remain forbidden. The architects had waited, their legacy gathering dust, hoping someone would eventually prove worthy of receiving it. Daniel felt a chill run down his spine. Humanity had passed the test, but only because they were either brave or stupid enough to ignore a warning that everyone else had taken seriously. He was not sure whether to feel proud or terrified. The hologram continued. The knowledge in the library would change whoever possessed it. Faster than light travel that did not require exotic matter, and could cross the galaxy in days instead of years. Medical technology that could cure any disease and extend lifespans by centuries. Energy systems that could power entire worlds without pollution or depletion. Manufacturing techniques that could turn raw asteroids into finished products. And most dangerous of all, weapons that could crack planets or stop stars from burning. This was why the other species had turned back. This knowledge could save civilizations or destroy them. In the wrong hands, in the hands of a violent or reckless species, these technologies would become tools of conquest and devastation. The architects had built the test to filter for species that combined intelligence with wisdom, courage with caution, ambition with responsibility. Daniel realized the magnitude of what they had found. This was not just a library. It was a weapon, a tool, and a responsibility all wrapped together. If humanity took this knowledge back to Earth, everything would change. There would be no going back. no way to unlearn what they had discovered. He gathered his team for another discussion. This decision was too big for him to make alone. They had opened the door together, and they would decide together what to do with what they found. Karen argued they should take everything. This knowledge could solve so many of Earth's problems. Poverty, disease, environmental damage, energy shortages. All of it could be fixed with what the architects had left behind. Refusing it because of fear would be turning their backs on billions of people who could benefit. Greg disagreed strongly. Humanity was not ready for this kind of power. They still fought wars over resources that would become meaningless with this technology. They still had countries that distrusted each other, corporations that put profit over people, and leaders who made decisions based on politics instead of wisdom. Giving them weapons that could destroy planets was asking for disaster. Marcus took a middle position. The knowledge itself was neutral. It could be used for good or evil, depending on who controlled it and how it was applied. The real question was whether humanity could be trusted to make good decisions. Their history was mixed at best. They had done terrible things, but they had also shown remarkable ability to learn and improve. Julie made an observation that changed the tone of the discussion. She pointed out that they were having this debate at all, which said something important about humanity. A truly reckless species would have grabbed everything without thinking. A truly evil species would have immediately started planning how to use the weapons. Instead, they were genuinely struggling with the moral implications. Brandon, who had been quiet until now, added his thoughts. He noted that refusing the knowledge would not make it go away. The library would still be here. Eventually, another species would reach this point. Maybe in 1,000 years, maybe in 10,000, but someone would open that door. Better for it to be humanity, who at least understood the risks, than some unknown species who might have worse intentions. Angela brought up a practical concern. Even if they wanted to refuse the knowledge, they had already seen too much. They knew it existed. They knew where it was. That information alone would drive every government and organization on Earth to try to claim it. The secret could not be kept, and attempts to control access would likely lead to conflict. After hours of debate, Daniel made his decision. They would take the knowledge, but they would not keep it secret. They would share everything with the Council of Aligned Worlds, making it available to all member species. This way, no single species could use it for conquest. Everyone would benefit, and everyone would have a stake in making sure it was used responsibly. It was a gamble. Daniel knew the Council might reject the offer, might decide humanity was too dangerous to be trusted with this power. But it was also the right thing to do. The architects had left this gift for the galaxy, not for one species. Humans just happened to be the first ones brave enough to claim it. They spent the next 2 weeks downloading everything from the library. The data was enormous, far more than their ship's computers could hold. Karen had to improvise new storage solutions, compressing files and prioritizing the most important information. Marcus worked on translating the technical specifications into terms humans and other species could understand. The rest of the team helped where they could, all of them aware they were handling something that would reshape galactic history. When they finally emerged from the labyrinth, they found Ambassador Zekthar waiting with a fleet of council ships. News of what happened had spread quickly. Some council members were excited about the architect's knowledge. Others were terrified. High Commander Vorn had brought Krell warships, prepared to take the information by force if necessary. Daniel requested a meeting with the full council. He transmitted a message explaining what they had found and what they wanted to do with it. The response took 3 days to arrive. The council was divided. Some species wanted to accept Daniel's offer and share the knowledge. Others wanted to quarantine both humanity and the library, keeping the dangerous information locked away. While waiting for a final decision, Daniel thought about what it meant to be human in a galaxy full of older, wiser species. Humans were newcomers, the new kids who did not know all the rules yet. They made mistakes, took risks, and sometimes caused problems, but they also brought something the galaxy had been missing for a long time. They brought the willingness to take chances, to try new things, to open doors that everyone else was afraid to touch. Maybe that made them dangerous. Maybe it made them valuable. Probably it made them both. The Council's decision finally arrived. They would accept humanity as provisional members, with conditions. The architect's knowledge would be shared, but under strict oversight. A special committee would decide how and when new technologies were released. Humans would be monitored closely, their expansion into the galaxy carefully managed. It was not everything humanity had hoped for, but it was better than quarantine. Earth would have access to the stars, and the galaxy would have access to the architect's legacy. Whether this turned out to be humanity's greatest achievement or biggest mistake remained to be seen. Daniel prepared his ship for the journey home, knowing his life would never be normal again. He had passed the test, but in doing so, he had also proven that humans were exactly as dangerous as the Council feared. The only question now was whether dangerous and valuable could coexist. 6 months had passed since Daniel Wright returned to Earth with the architect's knowledge. The galaxy had changed in ways nobody could have predicted. The Council of Aligned Worlds had established a technology sharing program, carefully releasing new discoveries to member species. Faster ships were being built. New medicines were curing diseases that had plagued civilizations for thousands of years. Energy systems were being upgraded across hundreds of worlds. But with progress came tension. Not all species agreed with how the knowledge was being distributed. Some wanted faster access to the advanced technologies. Others argued for slower, more careful implementation. The Krell Dominion, still angry about the original break-in at their station, pushed for strict limits on human expansion. They did not trust the species that had caused all these changes. Victoria Hayes stood on the bridge of a new ship called the Pathfinder. After her discovery of the Krell station, she had become famous on Earth and controversial in the rest of the galaxy. Some saw her as a hero who had opened humanity's path to the stars. Others saw her as a reckless troublemaker who had endangered galactic stability. The Council had decided to give her a new mission, partly as a reward and partly to keep her away from more sensitive situations. She would lead the first joint human-alien exploration mission into uncharted space. The goal was to map regions of the galaxy that nobody had explored yet, looking for new resources, new planets, and possibly new civilizations. It was the kind of mission Victoria had always dreamed about, and it came with a crew designed to keep her cautious instincts in check. The Pathfinder carried 30 humans and 20 aliens from various Council species. The aliens were officially there as scientific advisors and cultural liaisons. Unofficially, everyone knew they were observers, sent to make sure humans did not cause any more diplomatic incidents. Every major decision required approval from both Victoria and the alien delegation leader, a cautious Valex named Soren. Peter Blake had joined Victoria again as chief engineer. Linda Martinez was there as the head of the science division. Julie Adams, who had been part of Daniel's team in the labyrinth, signed on as chief medical officer. The rest of the crew was a mix of Earth's best and brightest, all eager to explore, and all carefully screened for responsibility and judgment. The alien crew members included specialists from 7 different species, Krell engineers who understood shield technology better than anyone, Threxian biologists who could analyze alien life forms, Valex navigators who had spent centuries mapping known space. They brought experience and wisdom that humanity lacked, and they were determined to teach humans proper caution. The mission launched with appropriate ceremony. Earth's leaders made speeches about cooperation and shared destiny. Council representatives talked about the bright future of galactic unity. Victoria listened politely and then got her crew into space as quickly as possible. She had exploring to do and speeches were boring. The first 3 months went smoothly. They mapped several uninhabited systems, cataloged new stellar phenomena, and established a routine that worked well for the mixed crew. The humans learned to appreciate alien expertise and caution. The aliens learned that human enthusiasm could be valuable when properly directed. They were becoming a real team instead of just humans and aliens sharing a ship. Then they reached the edge of what was called the Silent Zone. Every species in the galaxy knew about the Silent Zone. It was a region of space where every expedition had vanished without a trace. Over thousands of years, 17 different species had sent ships, probes, and even entire fleets to investigate. None had returned. No distress signals, no debris fields, no evidence of what happened to them. They simply entered the zone and disappeared. The Council's official policy was to avoid the Silent Zone completely. The border was clearly marked on all navigation charts with warnings in every known language. Whatever was in there, it was dangerous enough to destroy any ship that got too close. Wisdom meant accepting some mysteries would never be solved. Victoria wanted to investigate immediately. Soren, the Valix delegation leader, absolutely refused. The mission parameters were clear. They were supposed to explore safe, uncharted regions, not throw themselves into a well-known death trap. Victoria argued that understanding the Silent Zone could save lives and answer questions that had haunted the galaxy for millennia. Soren argued that answering those questions was not worth dying for. The debate spread through the entire crew. The human crew members were divided. Some agreed with Victoria, excited by the challenge and curious about what they might find. Others thought Soren was right, that exploring the Silent Zone was suicide dressed up as scientific curiosity. The alien crew members were almost unanimously opposed, though a few younger ones admitted they were tempted by the mystery. Julie found herself in an interesting position. She had opened the final door in the labyrinth, so she understood the appeal of facing the unknown. She had also seen the consequences of that decision, the weight of responsibility that came with dangerous knowledge. She thought both Victoria and Soren had valid points. After 3 days of argument, Julie called a meeting of the senior staff. She proposed a compromise. They would not enter the Silent Zone immediately, but they would study it from the border. They would send probes, collect data, and analyze everything they could learn from a safe distance. If they found concrete evidence that investigation was possible without suicide, they could then discuss entering. If the evidence suggested the zone was truly lethal, they would report their findings and move on. It was a classic human solution, trying to balance curiosity with caution. Victoria was not entirely happy because she wanted to go in right away. Soren was not entirely happy because he wanted to leave immediately, but both could accept the compromise, which probably meant it was a good plan. They spent 2 weeks studying the Silent Zone's border. Peter designed probes that could gather data and return, avoiding the fate of previous expeditions. Linda analyzed the sensor readings, looking for patterns or anomalies. The alien specialists contributed their knowledge, comparing the current data with historical records from previous attempts. Slowly, a picture emerged. The Silent Zone was not a natural phenomenon. It was artificial, some kind of massive barrier or field that surrounded a large region of space. The energy readings were consistent with technology similar to what the architects had used, though on a much larger scale. Whatever was creating the barrier had been running for millions of years, and it was still perfectly functional. More importantly, Peter discovered something nobody had noticed before. The barrier did not destroy ships. It displaced them, moving them somewhere else using a technology that was far beyond current galactic understanding. The ships that entered the Silent Zone had not been destroyed. They had been transported, possibly to another location, possibly to another dimension. Without knowing the destination, there was no way to know if the transport was survivable. This discovery changed the debate entirely. If ships were being transported rather than destroyed, there was a chance they could survive the experience. But there was also a chance the destination was lethal, or that the transport process itself was fatal. Previous expeditions might be waiting on the other side, still alive but unable to return, or they might have died instantly upon arrival. Victoria saw an opportunity. If they could modify their ship to track the transport process, they might be able to return even if previous expeditions could not. Peter thought it was possible, though risky. The modifications would take weeks and might not work. Soren thought the entire idea was insane and represented exactly the kind of reckless behavior the Council had warned about. The argument started again, more intense than before. Julie watched her friends and colleagues divide into camps. She realized this was about more than just exploring the Silent Zone. It was about what it meant to be part of a galactic community that valued safety over discovery. She thought about the labyrinth and the lesson the architects had tried to teach. Progress required courage, but she also thought about the thousands of people who had vanished into the Silent Zone, their families never knowing what happened to them. Courage without wisdom was just stupidity with better marketing. Finally, Julie made her own proposal. They would take the question to a vote, but not a simple majority vote. To enter the Silent Zone, they would need approval from both 2/3 of the human crew and 2/3 of the alien crew. This meant both groups would have to agree, forcing real discussion and compromise rather than one side outvoting the other. The vote took place 3 days later. Julie spent those days talking to crew members individually. listening to their concerns and fears. She learned that even the most enthusiastic explorers had doubts, and even the most cautious aliens felt the pull of curiosity. Everyone understood they were deciding something important, not just for themselves, but for how humans and aliens would work together in the future. When the votes were counted, the results surprised everyone. 70% of the human crew voted to investigate, which was expected. What shocked Victoria and Soren both was that 68% of the alien crew also voted yes. The younger aliens had convinced some of the older ones, arguing that humanity's. Peter Blake worked day and night for 3 weeks modifying the Pathfinder's systems. He installed tracking beacons that would record their position through the transport process. He upgraded the shields to handle energy readings they had detected at the silent zone boundary. He even built a special communications array that might, if they were lucky, send a signal back through whatever barrier separated them from normal space. The modifications were based partly on architect technology and partly on Peter's own engineering intuition. Nobody had ever done anything like this before. There was no manual, no tested procedure, no guarantee any of it would work. But that was normal for human engineering. They built things that should not work and then fixed them until they did. Linda prepared the science teams for every possible scenario they might encounter. Unknown spatial dimensions, temporal distortions, exotic matter, parallel universes, or just really weird normal space. She created protocols for gathering data regardless of what they found. Even if they only survived for a few seconds, the ship's systems would record everything and hopefully transmit it back before they died. Julie made sure the medical bay was stocked for emergencies. She did not know what injuries might result from dimensional transport, but she prepared for everything from radiation exposure to spatial displacement sickness. She also made sure everyone on board understood the risks and had made peace with their decisions. Some people wrote letters home just in case. Others spent time in quiet meditation or prayer. Everyone dealt with fear in their own way. The alien crew members approached the situation with mixed emotions. The older ones, like Soren, accepted the decision but made sure everyone knew they thought it was foolish. The younger ones were excited and scared in equal measure. They had spent their lives being told that caution was wisdom, and now they were about to do something their species would consider reckless. It felt wrong and exhilarating at the same time. On the day of the attempt, Victoria gathered everyone in the main assembly area. She gave a short speech, thanking them for their courage and reminding them why they were doing this. 17 expeditions had vanished into the silent zone. Thousands of people had died or disappeared, and their families had never learned what happened to them. The Pathfinder crew had a chance to answer questions that had haunted the galaxy for thousands of years. They were afraid, but they were going anyway because that was what explorers did. The ship approached the silent zone boundary slowly. Every sensor was active, recording everything. The barrier was visible now, a shimmering wall of energy that stretched in every direction. It looked beautiful and terrifying, like standing at the edge of a waterfall and preparing to jump. Peter's instruments detected the transport field activating. The barrier was reading their ship, analyzing it, preparing to move them. He had seconds to make final adjustments. His fingers flew over the controls, setting up the tracking systems and making sure the emergency beacon was ready to deploy. Victoria gave the order. The Pathfinder moved forward, crossing the boundary between known space and whatever lay beyond. The universe twisted around them. Sensors screamed warnings. The hull groaned under stresses it was not designed to handle. Then everything went silent. They were somewhere else. The first thing Victoria noticed was that they were still alive. The second thing was that the stars were different. Completely different. Not just a different view of the same galaxy, but different types of stars in different arrangements. This was not normal space, or at least not the same normal space they had left. Peter checked his instruments and started laughing. The tracking beacons had worked. They knew exactly where they were in relation to the barrier, and more importantly, they knew how to get back. The transport process had been uncomfortable but not dangerous. They could return anytime they wanted. Linda's sensors detected something even more surprising. There were structures out here, artificial constructs floating in the strange space. And there were ships, lots of them. Some were ancient. Designs from civilizations that had reached the silent zone thousands of years ago. Others were more recent. All of them were intact, functional, and transmitting status signals. The 17 expeditions had not been destroyed. They had been brought here, to this pocket of space created by the architects or someone like them. And they were all still alive. Victoria opened communications channels and started broadcasting. Within an hour, they had responses. Ship after ship, expedition after expedition, all the missing vessels that the galaxy had mourned. They were trapped here, unable to find the way back but alive and waiting for rescue. The stories varied. Some ships had arrived recently by their perception. Others had been here for what seemed like years, though time moved strangely in this space. They had explored, studied, and tried to find a way home. Some had given up hope. Others had kept searching. All of them were shocked and grateful to finally have contact with the outside universe. But there was more to discover. The structures Linda had detected were not just random buildings. They were another gift from the architects, another test like the labyrinth. This pocket dimension was a research facility, a place where species could study advanced physics without endangering their home space. The barriers, the transport system, everything was designed to give access to knowledge while preventing accidents from spreading. The architects had created a sandbox for experimentation, and they had left it running for millions of years, waiting for someone curious enough to enter. Every species that reached this place gained access to research that would have been too dangerous to conduct in normal space. They could study exotic matter, test reality-altering technologies, and explore the boundaries of physics without risk of destroying their homeworlds. The trapped expeditions had not been prisoners. They had been students given access to a university they could not leave. Some had learned tremendous amounts. Others had focused on finding a way home and missed the opportunity. Now, with the Pathfinder's tracking technology, they could all return and share what they had discovered. Victoria realized what this meant. The Silent Zone was not a threat. It was an invitation. The architects had created the mysterious barrier specifically to attract curious species, to filter for civilizations brave enough to explore the unknown. It was another test, one that humanity had just passed. Over the next week, Peter helped the trapped expeditions modify their ships with the tracking technology. It was simple once you knew how, but it required understanding transport physics that were only recently available, thanks to the architect's library. The expeditions prepared to return home, some after decades of isolation. But before they left, the expedition leaders held a meeting. They represented a dozen different species, including some that were normally rivals or competitors. Their time in the Silent Zone had changed them. They had worked together, shared resources, and helped each other survive. They had learned things their home civilizations needed to know. They also agreed on something important. Humanity's arrival had changed the situation. The existence of the research facility was too valuable to keep secret, but it was also too dangerous to make freely available. They would recommend the Council establish it as a shared resource, a place where all species could conduct advanced research under controlled conditions. Victoria agreed, with one condition. Humans would have equal access, not limited access, not supervised access. If the galaxy was going to use this gift from the architects, humanity deserved to be fully included. The expedition leaders debated briefly before agreeing. Humanity had earned it by being brave enough to enter the Silent Zone. The return journey was triumphant. Ship after ship emerged from the Silent Zone, broadcasting their identities to the galaxy. Families were reunited. Species that had mourned their explorers for generations learned they were still alive, and everyone wanted to know how the rescue had happened. The answer was simple and complicated. A human named Victoria Hayes, who had a history of ignoring warnings and opening sealed doors, had decided to investigate a mystery everyone else had been too cautious to approach. She had been helped by a crew that combined human curiosity with alien wisdom. Together they had found something that changed the galaxy's understanding of the architects and their legacy. Ambassador Zek Thar convened another emergency council session. The Silent Zone situation required immediate attention. Some council members were angry that Victoria had violated protocols again. Others were grateful that thousands of missing people had been found. Everyone agreed that something needed to be decided about future access to the research facility. The debate lasted for weeks. Different species had different opinions. The Krell wanted strict control and limited access. The Valaks wanted open access but careful oversight. Younger civilizations wanted equal opportunities. Older civilizations worried about safety. Finally, Counselor Mirashan proposed a solution. She had been one of the first to recognize humanity's dangerous curiosity. and she had watched them prove both the benefits and risks of that trait. Her proposal was elegant and practical. The research facility would be open to all council members, but with requirements. Any species wanting to conduct experiments there would need to submit proposals, safety reviews, and share their